I want to focus on the brain. The brain, again, it is moldable. It is impressionable, especially for children, because this is their most, developmental stage in their upbringing. Well, muchachos y muchachas, we are well in the month of June, and you guys already know what that means. It is a big, dedicated celebration of those who want to express their preference and who they do the horizontal monkey dance with. And look, this used to be more geared towards adults, right? There were parades and there were festivals that had the adultic themes. It was pretty understood that, yeah, this was like a preference that adults, express and all that, right? But now this is all changed because this is now gearing itself more incrementally to include children. And I wanted to talk about that. Now, with children, especially, is so impressionable. Their developmental stages are continuously molding. And that's the part that I really want to hone in on, right? Because with this being said, introducing your child so early on into these events, it encompasses the theme of naughty, right? Doing the naughty components, naughty dressing, naughty. I mean, it's wild to me that we even have to talk about this. But, I wanted to explain my stance because especially being in the anti-exploitative industry that I'm in, you really want to nip this in the bud. A lot of times when there are youth that have been used and abused in that way, it's because they came from the nature and environment of grooming. It was an adult in their life, whether it was a family or it was a friend, a family friend, whatever, they introduced an element of grooming and secrecy, and they utilized some of these tactics to regress that emotional response so that way it became normalized. And in a way, this is the same thing. And I'm going to explain a little bit as we transpire through. I want to focus on the brain. The brain, again, it is moldable. It is impressionable, especially for children, because this is their most, developmental stage in their upbringing. And so there are a lot of physical elements, scientific elements to this. In this video, I wanted to focus on the neuroscience behind the developmental stages of the brain. And we're going to get to the rest of these brain-specific facts. But first, I'd like to thank the sponsor of this video, 𝘬𝘲𝑆ummer Cool. With summer already here, especially in Texas, we've got some hot ones. You don't want to spend an exorbitant amount on your power bill, and this guy is going to help you. This is a 4-in-1 portable AC unit. I like to keep mine on near my working area since I'm there most of the day, and I don't really necessarily need to cool down my entire apartment, just in the specific areas that I work. And especially when I go to sleep, I get really, really hot. And so this baby sits right by my nightstand and it keeps me cool. You can go to 𝘬𝘲𝘮𝘢𝑚𝑒.com. You'll save 50% off today in time for Father's Day.
And one of the major changes that we see during adolescence is the development of the frontal lobe, particularly the prefrontal cortex. And I'll roughly indicate where on the brain that is. And this is the area of the brain that is responsible for what scientists call higher order cognition. Things like thinking about the future and planning and decision making. And also the ability to inhibit certain behaviors and focus on long-term goals. And this part of the brain doesn't really stop maturing until our early 20s. And because it is still developing during the teenage years, because it isn't fully developed, this might help to explain why teenagers sometimes show poor judgment.
Okay, so she mentions the prefrontal lobe cortex. To me, this is one of the it's not my decision, right? This is science, but as you can see, she starts off with this. This is your decision-making process in your brain. And what I want to focus in on is her statement about the maturity of this part of the brain, in which doesn't fully reach until you are an adult. She mentions the age of 25, but I will also mention that there are some researchers that also argue that this could even extend the maturity factor up until your 30s. For me, I'm going to personally attest that homegirl here didn't feel full maturity in my decision-making process until probably the age of 30. I mean, around there, probably even more, maybe 31, right? I truly didn't feel, that security in my discernment, in my decision-making processes until this age, right? Before then, I was making super stupid decisions at the age of 25. Like, I'm just going to be completely honest about my own personal experience, right? And that there was science behind that. It's because I wasn't personally mature in a developmental sense until I reached full maturity at the age of 30. Now, there might be people out there that fully mature at the age of 25. They exist, right? I definitely was not that person. So putting that into perspective, she's actually talking about adolescent teens in this video. Teens, okay? So she's talking about them not being able to make those decisions for themselves, to comprehend that. It's because they just physically cannot do this. They are not developed enough to comprehend that. So when we're talking about children in this mix, children are still at the stage where this part of the brain isn't even, it's not even within the realm or relativity of maturity. So they can't make decisions or comprehend things that are happening fully around them. So let's take it to the instance of, what's going on today, where we're seeing parents willingly submersing their children into these environments of, going to bars and drag shows, where, again, I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, this was more geared towards adults. You go to Eventbrite. Well, if you do it in the month of June, you're going to find something different, because you're definitely going to find those events that are like, children inclusive. But any other time outside of June, if you go to eventbrite.com and search for a drag show, you're going to see a pretty consistent criteria that you've got to be what age to get in. And this is pretty clear across the board in every single state. Why? Because it is the universal age in the United States to get into these clubs to be 21 and up. And there's a reason for that. There's adultic themed nightlife entertainment. There is drinking. I mean, there's a lot of different components to this, right? So when you are entering your child into this environment, what you are doing is you're introducing them to an environment they don't understand. And when we're talking about the naughty, which is what we're essentially introducing them to, they shouldn't even be in the realm of comprehending anything towards that at this moment. They should be comprehending reading, writing, reading comprehension, the basic functions of our society, the basic functions of being a human being, right? And I think, like, from the perspective of the parents that do this, they're wanting to intend their child to submerge themselves in this environment, so that way they can be more accepting, not realizing that there are other components to the naughty, right, that are unforeseen, right? So if you're grooming your child to accept this, there are other elements that come with that. They just can't understand and comprehend those elements. So then we're gearing ourselves into a conversation of putting up personal barriers and parameters, personal, what is the word? I can't think of it, but I think parameters is the best thing that I can think of right now. But there are certain limits that you need to put on your personal well-being. And if you're already putting them into the world of naughty components, naughty dancing, all of these things, kids are absorbing that, but they're not fully absorbing all of the downstream consequences that come with that. It is the essential element of the naughty that they are entering, right? So they don't understand everything else. So this is why, I find it concerning that, it's not just the bars that are doing this. It's now schools, it's community events. There are corporations that are openly celebrating this, right? Now, you saw State Farm receive their backlash for promoting these types of books. You see Target receiving their backlash for promoting, merchandise, clothing lines, even things like that are restrictive for girls, to bind their chest and take them outside of their anatomical design. These things are just not comprehensible for children. Now, when you're an adult, and I can't change everybody, right? I can't impend my opinion on everybody. But when you're an adult and you want to make that decision, you're mature enough to understand what this is. Okay. So, by doing this, you're immersing them into an environment they do not understand. And that environment has a nefarious side to it.
Another area of the brain that continues to develop during adolescence is the limbic system. And this includes a number of different brain structures. And this image isn't really the best way to view them because a lot of the structures are on either side of the midline. Even so, I want to point out about where they are in the brain. And one structure included in the limbic system is the amygdala, which would be about here. And this is the part of our brain that's responsible for emotions and emotional responses. And it also includes the hypothalamus, which is here, and let me pick a slightly different color for that. And this part of the brain regulates a surprising number of things. But in particular, I want to focus on its role concerning the endocrine system, or the hormone system in our bodies. And to be clear, the limbic system includes a bunch of other structures as well, but I really want to focus on these two. Because in combination with the prefrontal cortex, which helps to regulate our emotions, the fact that these structures are still developing during the teenage years might help to explain why teenagers can sometimes be moody.
So she talks about the limbic system in the brain. Now, she talks about hormone regulation and all that. I want to actually talk about some of these hormones. Now, there is some other dangers out there, of course, that include the naughty, like naughty videos that, that also have very heavy impacts, not just on children, but adults, right? Adults regularly talk about this nowadays, how they are damaged from watching the naughty videos and how it's had an effect on their behavioral, naughty health, all these things. There are a lot of effects that downstream out of watching this. And I'm going to explain a little bit about this, about the, your neuro pathways, your neurotransmitters, hormones that accompany this, Now, the brain is, again, when you're young, you have neurons, right? And you're en route to building these neuro pathways. So this is where those neurotransmitters, they communicate with different parts of the brain. And so when you're carving out that pathway in your brain, the neuro pathways, you're creating what makes you feel good. What is a reward system? What is normal? You know what I mean? So when you're already, introducing naughty to them at the age of, we're talking, when we're looking at these videos, we're seeing elementary school kids in these environments, right? So imagine what kind of neural pathways they're building for themselves. So let's talk about some of these hormones, because these are the physical aspects of how the brain communicates with its neural pathways, right? So it says here from protectyouryoungeyes.com, and of course they are talking about the naughty videos, right? But essentially, if this is live and in person, and you're seeing, again, scantily clad, dressed adults who are dropping it and shaking it and all these things in front of children, this is essentially doing a live to live play out in front of them. And it feels so wrong. Again, it feels so wrong to even pair that, but this is what it's doing. So it says here, for all its complexity, the brain operates according to a very simple principle. Whatever you feed it is what it learns to love, especially before the age of 16, with the heart racing excitement, norepinephrine that comes from naughty content, oxytocin, naughty videos, or naughty play-by-plays. The brain focuses the body's attention until it climaxes, and the serotonin is affected and creates a desire for dopamine to repeat the process. So dopamine is that feel-good hormone. It's a rewarding hormone. So, when you're teaching your brain that, hey, this is good, this is what rewards me, I like to see this, your brain wants that more and more and more and more, okay? And Deborah Halber, a news science writer, puts it best in this way. She says neurons in the different regions of the brain comprising the reward system communicate using dopamine. It enhances reward-related memories and creates emotional associations with rewards. It's not the reward itself, but the expectation of a reward that most powerfully influences emotional reactions and memories. So you get the message by now, like, if you're introducing your child to produce dopamine for the naughty natures of things, where does it stop? Where are the parameters for this, right? Because you're thinking you're immersing them into these environments to teach them inclusivity and acceptance, but it does not stop there. The naughty nature of humanity does not stop there. It gets more nefarious, right? So you're essentially teaching, what you don't know that you're teaching them is that this is a feel-good hormone that's going to teach their brains that they want more and more of this. And guess what, right? We're talking about neural pathways. You're building your neural pathways to believe like this is good, this is good, this is good. But guess what? What if that maximizes and you're looking for that next best thing? I'm looking for that next best thing. Then you're crossing boundaries and you're looking to raise the bar and you're teaching your child this without even knowing it.
There are also other more global changes that are happening in the brain during this period, or changes that are happening throughout the brain. And one thing that we see during this period is an increase in myelination, especially in the areas that are associated with higher order functioning. And to quickly review, this is a neuron, and neurons communicate with each other by sending signals down these long axons. And myelin is a fatty tissue that covers the axons of neurons and helps to increase the speed at which the neurons can communicate. And faster communication between neurons means faster communication between brain areas. And this can help explain why adolescents are able to process information faster than children. Another thing that we see during this time period is that there's an increase in brain volume during early adolescence, and then this shrinks during late adolescence. And this suggests that adolescence is a period of synaptic pruning, or cutting weak connections in the brain. So this is your body literally breaking down connections between neurons. And you might initially think that this is a bad thing, but this pruning is actually really good and it's really important, because it allows the body to focus energy and resources on the connections that are used most.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that, right? So synaptic pruning, and you heard her mention that this is a process in which your body starts to, essentially prune away those neural pathways that are not really being used. So if your dopamine, for instance, when you're talking about the naughty nature, of course, this is something that is intended, that is good, right? For adults, right? In healthy settings. And so when you're introducing that to children, and this is a, feel good action and all these things, like, you're essentially building them to believe that, and your dopamine is building and rewarding your brain. So when you're building the neural pathways to strengthen in that respect, where they're always trying to raise the bar because it's rewarding in their brains, in the concept of their brain, then what about all the other functions? All of the other learning components, language, dialect, all of the things that you want to teach your child, this starts becoming more prevalent, and all of the other things start pruning away. You are harming your child's development because you have essentially introduced them to this thing that is overpowering, okay? So anyway, I know that that was a brief overview, but I wanted to kind of give you guys the science behind the brain, right? I know I introduced my spirituality in this as well, because it's definitely, it is an active factor, guaranteed, right? But there is a physical aspect to this that also needs to be talked about. And it's going to harm children in our future generations if you don't take a grip on it now. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you know any of this about the brain and the developmental stages? Let me know. I know that, again, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I find all of this very fascinating in the way that it affects children, especially within the anti-exploitation industry and what we're trying to prevent. Guys, thank you so much for your attention to this. Thank you for your love and your support. I really appreciate you. I will catch you in the next video. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. You can find more videos on my newly redone website, nataleedenise.com, where I've got a series going on, naming names, as well as a truth speakeasy where I can speak easy about current day topics and controversies. Grab your membership today, become a member, or just simply a patron. I so appreciate all of your love and your support.